And they're there living among them because they want to make God known. We have friends who have been stoned for their faith, shot for their faith, imprisoned for their faith, and they joyfully go back to the same people because we have to make him known. The one true God. And where did it all start? And it all started with Yeshua the Messiah coming into the world. Islam is not telling you to follow the scriptures. Islam is not telling you to follow the God of the Bible. Islam is certainly not telling you to bless Israel. And yet those who are truly followers of Jesus, the Psalms are their sacred hymns. The Proverbs are their words of wisdom. The prophets speak to them to this day, and they feel the sacred mission to be witnesses, to share the good news that redemption has come. And it continues to spread the knowledge of God, making its way through the earth until the grand, great finale. This calling originates with the Jewish people, hence it comes through Moses and the prophets, hence a Jewish Messiah, hence Jewish emissaries, and now largely Gentiles carrying this around the world to their people. But Paul indicates it's all going to come back in a way of mercy and grace. Right now, in communist China, in the midst of terrible persecution, we have a good number of grads working in communist China. When you email back and forth, you can't communicate just in normal religious language. One of the grads had just sent a note. He was so encouraged. They were in the apartment of a Chinese person who was not a believer, who was just in pain, and they were just standing around the person. Obviously, they're praying, but you can't use that religious language. He said, and then Dad came down from his apartment and touched the man, and he was all better. And he said, my dad came down. I thought, I know your dad lived in China. And I said, oh, your dad, your heavenly Father. Got it. Some of our friends work with people who've been tortured terribly for the faith, who've suffered horrifically. The gospel has grown in leaps and bounds in China under communism, to the point of multiplied tens of millions who've come to the faith. But interestingly, in China now, there is a back to Jerusalem movement that has been birthed, where they want to send out as many as 100,000 missionaries. And this is their philosophy. They're going to go through the Muslim, Buddhist, and Hindu world and end up in Jerusalem. Back to Jerusalem movement birthed out of communist China, with Christians with barely access to Bibles sometimes, but who love God, and who realize it started in Jerusalem, it's going to end in Jerusalem. And you know what they said? There's nothing these governments can do to us more than their own government's done. Torture, persecution, death. And the people going out, they said, we're not only willing to die, we're expecting to die. No, not suicide bombers who blow themselves up to take other lives, but godly people who say, if you hit me, if you kill me, I'm going to love you. I'm going to lay down my life for you. I had a student when I was leading our school in Maryland many years ago. A young Jewish man was married to a young Japanese woman. He had studied in Japan for some years and spoke Japanese fluently. Since gone on to do PhD work at Cambridge University. And he was part of an organization in Japan. The leader was a famed Japanese leader. While he was a missionary, I believe in Manchuria, God spoke to him, you must return to Japan and call the Japanese Christians to pray for three things. This was in the 40s. Number one, that the Jewish people are reestablished in their homeland. Number two, that Jerusalem will return to Jewish hands. And number three, that Jesus the Messiah will return to Jerusalem. First happened, second happened, gives you some confidence about the third. There's just these indications of God working, that the mercy that started in one place, the open door that came through the Jewish people, the good news is going to the Gentiles. Now mercy's coming back to the Jewish people. Hence this great outpouring of love for the modern state of Israel and Jewish people worldwide, and great solidarity. I have a black pastor friend who quite amazingly shares meetings. His church near D.C. for years has met in a room in a synagogue that the rabbi of this synagogue said when we were first getting started, this Christian group let us share their building. We felt to repay the favor. And I've seen videotape some years back now, but they're still in good relationship, where these black Christians stood, they had a joint meeting, one of the synagogue services, and they came in and they said, we will die for you to protect you. We will stand with you to the death. Where does this come from? Black Christians in D.C. in a synagogue professing their extreme love for Israel? It's time for mercy to come back. I was talking to a couple in Finland, probably in their 40s, maybe a little older. The wife had just come back from 9 months volunteer work at a hospital in Israel, serving on a voluntary basis to care, I believe it was for Jewish children. And I said to the husband, your wife was away for 9 months. I believe their children were raised and out of the home. Your wife was away for 9 months. I said, if someone asked you, why would you do this? What would you say? He said, because we love the Jews. Why else? See, in 35 years, traveling around the world, being with believers in so many different settings, this is what I've encountered. This is what I've seen. I was preaching in Italy one day, an Italian pastor came up to me and said, I want you to know there is not a single service that we hold in our church where we do not pray for Israel. And it's not just praying, God, those filthy, miserable Jews that are so blind, save them or kill them. No, it's praying for mercy and compassion and love of God. Yes, we want to see Jewish people believe in their Messiah, of course. But just praying for God to protect his people in Israel and be with them. Later this year, God willing, December of this year, 2006, I'm scheduled to speak at a major conference in Italy, just with all these churches coming together to understand how they can stand with Israel and pray for Israel and bless Israel. And that has not been a great part of Italian Christian history, and yet, as God's reviving their hearts, they come to these conclusions. This man said to me, there's not a church service we have where we don't pray for Israel. He said, there's not a meal we have in my home where we don't pray for Israel, and there's not a time I get on my knees to pray where I don't personally pray for Israel. I have one friend who was born outside of the United States who has preached to large crowds in Africa and other nations, and has preached the gospel to people who were animists, worshipers of tribal gods and other things, and they've come to faith in Jesus. And when he gives them instruction upon coming to faith in Jesus, he instructs them daily with their meals to pray for God's blessing in Israel and to fast 1 day a week for the Jewish people. So Gentile, where does this come from? Where is God writing this in so many hearts? Is there something going on? I only tracked this through about the mid-90s, so I can't give you stats from there on. But there is an American missionary couple in Cochabamba, Bolivia, not exactly the most well-known city in the world. They had a guest house and a mission work there. A backpacking Israeli passed through their area, stayed at their house, and they showed him the Messianic prophecies, and they talked to him about the Jewish roots of the New Testament faith, and he was very impressed with it. So in his